Hello, I am Zachary Stein, and I'm presenting our paper titled Comparative Religion, Topic Models, and Conceptualization towards the characterization of structural relationships between online religious discourses. This was co-authored with Dr. James Dietrich and Dr. Nitin Agarwal, who's my advisor. So the motivation for this paper is a theory of religious creolization that has some interesting implications for doing comparative religion. This theory posits a distinction between a cultural lexicon and a cultural grammar. And the way to understand a cultural lexicon, sort of like the jargon that is distinct to a particular religious identity, sort of the explicitly chosen forms of religious expression that signal the religious identity. Cultural grammar is maybe a little more vague. The idea is that it's the sort of deeper cultural structures that are reflected in how the cultural lexicon is used. So an example of this that our collaborator, Jim Dietrich, has written about before is that American engaged Buddhism, it's the way that it goes about doing social ethics, is that he has argued, uses a cultural lexicon that is Buddhist. It uses Buddhist terminology to talk about social ethics. But the way that it uses that Buddhist lexicon reflects sort of a deeper understanding, perspectives, assumptions, or a deeper worldview about social ethics that's ultimately something closer to liberal Protestant Christianity. So it's using a Buddhist lexicon in a way that reflects a cultural grammar that is still based in liberal Protestantism. So this has some interesting implications for doing comparative religion. And what we'd like to do here is construct an operationalization where we have two religious discourses, and we don't want to compare them on the basis that one uses terms that are different from the other, that they each have their own cultural lexicon. We want to understand the relationship between their cultural grammars. It's a little more fuzzy. And so some starting assumptions for how we go about doing this operationalization include that when we're looking at a religious discourse, the salient feature in a discourse for us is that it provides a way of making sense. And it does so by providing an organizational scheme or a categorizational scheme or even a conceptual scheme. And that this scheme reflects the cultural grammar underlying the discourse. And so so a discourse has this kind of organizational scheme, and if two discourses, if their organizational schemes function in similar ways in how they organize, conceptualize information, then we assume that they're structurally similar, that there's some overlap in their cultural grammars. And we assume that this is the case even if the categories themselves or the concepts from each discourse, even if they look different, as long as they function similarly in doing this organizing, then that's what we care about, that they're structurally similar. So to make this a little more clear, we carried out within a case study taken from Reddit. So if you're familiar with Reddit, it's a very popular discussion platform with all these different communities called subreddits, where people discuss a variety of topics, including religion. So the two primary communities that we're looking at are called Our Buddhism and Our Christianity. These are very large communities that have been around since 2008, and we're looking at 10 or 11 years worth of their discussion histories. Now, to make sense of the relationship between these two, to help kind of better contextualize our operationalization, we also include Our Religion and Our Math. Our Religion because it's sort of broader, but maybe includes both discussions of Christianity and Buddhism. And Our Math because we assume it's going to be pretty different from any of these. Now, importantly, we're not operating under any kind of delusion that our Buddhism and our Christianity are good representative samples for global Buddhism or Christianity. Probably there's not no such thing as global Buddhism or Christianity as coherent objects of study. These are particular communities that have interesting discourses in their own right. And so we're just looking at these communities. We're not trying to say something about all of Buddhism or something like that. So the first ingredient for our operationalization is topic models, specifically latent Dirichlet allocation. And if you're familiar with LDA, you specify a number of these things called topics, and the model looks at a corpus that you give it, and it comes up with some set of topics that are underlying the corpus. And topics is maybe not always the best word to use for these. They can be maybe better understood as word usage patterns. And they're technically a probability distribution over the vocabulary of the corpus. You also get, when you train one of these models, a representation of the corpus where each document is represented as a mixture of these topics. And you can also take this model and you can show it other unseen documents outside of, once it's already done training. You can show it new unseen documents and ask it to represent those new documents as mixtures of the topics that it's previously learned. So we're using LDA here because we're assuming that if what's of interest to us about a discourse is that it has some latent organizational scheme, that's hopefully that's kind of what LDA is picking up on. And it turns out it's going to do kind of okay at this. But that a topic model trained on a discourse contains something about that discourse's cultural grammar. And so if we have a topic model for one discourse and a topic model for another discourse, making sense of their organizational schemes, not the topics themselves, but how they function in organizing information, we can use what's called the mutual information to calculate the mutual consistency between their topic assignments. So mutual information is used if you have a set of objects and you have two different ways of partitioning them. Usually it's used as a measure of similarity between those two clusterings. In our case, we've got models that are each discourse specific, and the two models apply their topics to a set of documents. And then we just ask, how mutually consistent are those topic assignments? Another way to think about this is if we know that one model has assigned one particular topic as being high probability in a document, how much information do we have about what topic assignment we're likely to see from the other model? So if a topic from one model and a topic from another model, they tend to co-occur in how they're assigned to this common set of documents. If there's a lot of mutual consistency there, then there's going to be higher mutual information between them. So we're not comparing the topics themselves. We're comparing how the topics function in organizing a common set of documents, and that's what's captured by the mutual information. And so putting all this together for our operationalization of structural similarity, if we have one discourse, A, and another called B, we train a topic model on both of them. These topic models are heavily biased towards towards their training discourses. And then we have a common set of documents, a comparison corpus, and we ask model A to apply its topics to the comparison corpus. As a shorthand in the paper, we refer to this as asking model A to conceptualize the comparison corpus. We ask model B to do the same thing, and then we can calculate the mutual information between them to calculate how much mutual consistency there is in how they apply their topics. Again, not what the topics are, but a more functional comparison of how they're applied. Now, what to use for the comparison corpus. Ideally, this would be a very broad general corpus that touches on all sorts of different things of life. But in this case study, what we do is we just use one of the training discourses as the comparison corpus or as the source corpus. And if we do this, we can think of the structural similarity between them as measuring how well one discourse interprets the other. So let's say discourse B is the comparison corpus. We ask model A to conceptualize discourse B using its topics. And then when model B applies its topics to discourse B, that's just the corpus it was trained on. So you can sort of think of these as the true topic assignments of B. And then in measuring the mutual information between them, it's sort of like asking how well does model A sort of interpret model B or discourse B. And then you can do the opposite with discourse A as the comparison corpus. But still maybe a little bit fuzzy. So if we look at the case study, we do this whole process for the different subreddits, and for each subreddit pair, they're going to show up on this table twice. So it depends on which one's doing the interpreting and which one is the comparison corpus or the source corpus. So our Christianity does a really good job at interpreting our religion. Our Christianity also does a pretty good job of interpreting our Buddhism. Now, we kind of figured that probably our religion would do a good job of interpreting both our Christianity and our Buddhism, but actually our Christianity does a good job doing this. And then the pairs with math are down at the bottom, which we would be concerned if that wasn't the case. But even this, maybe it's hard to still get a sense of what's going on here. So we can break down the mutual information in each of these cases by looking at the mapping of the topics between two models here, between the models from two subreddits. And so this mutual information can be decomposed into something called pointwise mutual information. And so if we look at our Christianity and how its model interprets the documents of our Buddhism, we see that in documents from our Buddhism where this B16 topic about relationships, if it shows up a lot, then it's likely that our Christianity is going to assign its C15 topic also about relationships. Now, the second pair of topics here is interesting. B24 is about dietary ethics and eating meat, and C18 is about reproductive rights and abortion. Now, the topics themselves are quite different. And the way that they're different is that they reflect ethical concerns that kind of function as the cultural that function within the cultural lexicons of the two subreddits. So abortion isn't something that comes up a lot in our Buddhism. Reproductive rights don't come up a lot in our Buddhism. Similarly, eating meat and the ethics of it, and vegetarianism, don't come up a lot in our Christianity. So our Christianity doesn't have a topic about eating meat. So when our Christianity model sees documents from our Buddhism about dietary ethics, the words that are occurring a lot, like meat and vegetarianism or something, it doesn't have a topic where those words occur with high probability. However, it's got this reproductive rights and abortion topic. And the model that there's language in these dietary ethics documents that still has some salient overlap with the language that's used around reproductive rights and abortion. And so it recognizes and assigns this topic to documents about dietary ethics. And so this mapping has a pretty high pointwise mutual information. Now, how this mapping is constructed is probably that there's just a lot of language that reflects general, contentious, ethical debate that isn't specific to a cultural lexicon or vegetarianism or reproductive rights. Now, there could be some words that are, maybe words like killing probably show up in both of them. But there's a larger pattern of word usage that makes up each topic. And so it's interesting to see this relationship obtain. Similarly, further down, there's this topic B12 from Our Buddhism, text quotations. And when Our Christianity sees these documents that Our Buddhism classifies as being about text quotations, the Our Christianity model assigns or tends to assign this C23 topic, which reflects quoting Bible verses within Our Christianity. So this is interesting too, because you would imagine that Buddhist texts, if you're reading something in the Pali Canon, it probably has a very distinct lexicon from reading something from the Christian New Testament. However, these topics still recognize something in each other, despite the differences in their lexicons. And maybe in this case, it's something about the style of how ancient and sacred texts are translated into English. Maybe it's kind of a formal style or something like that. But these topics sort of recognize each other across models through the context of a comparison corpus. And this actually gives us some good hope that this is an interesting direction. And it turns out comparing models in this way is different from the standard way of comparing them, which is to compare the topics directly using something like Jensen-Shannon divergence. Here we're comparing topics sort of indirectly. We're comparing how the models functionally organize information and not what the topics are themselves. So we get some interesting results like this. Now, if you change which corpus is doing the interpreting and which corpus is the comparison or source corpus, you see a change in this ranking of topic pairs. Now, the abortion vegetarianism pair, it's like ranked 10th instead of 2nd. And so the context in which you compare the two models is important too. But I hope that if this has been an interesting teaser, that you'll check out the paper. And if you have any questions or thoughts about it, please do get in touch with me. I'd love to hear what you think. And yeah, thank you very much for your time.